We're in Presque Isle State Park's lagoon area. It was formed by a series of ponds that were connected back in the late 1920s, early 1930s, and it was originally meant to be a statewide world's biggest fish hatchery. They connected all the ponds, but they ran out of money before they could take it any further. The results today have been the fact that we still have a great natural fish hatchery that's semi-closed to the public because the only transportation back here are by electric powered boats or kayaks and canoes. So the public is sort of limited. Consequently, it is a fairly natural area with all kinds of animals and birds and things populating it all summer long. Presque Isle is French for almost an island. That's because 6 times during the recorded history of the park, it was an island. It broke through the neck of the peninsula and became an island. At one point, the openings was over a mile across and 20 feet deep. In the 1920s, the state turned it into a state park. It was the second state park in the whole state of Pennsylvania. Valley Forge was first, and then this park. It wasn't called Presque Isle State Park at the time. They originally named it Pennsylvania State Park at Erie. One of the areas I'd like to talk about, and you will see, is where Perry Monument is. At one point was called Crystal Bay, Crystal Point, and Perry Monument was dedicated to Commodore Perry after his victory on Lake Erie and Put-in Bay. After the battle is where this bay became famous. 5 of the 9 ships moored for the winter, and Little Bay produced many deaths and many problems because of the severe winter we had and the fact that the typhoid fever was running rampant through and many people died. To get them off of the various ships after their death, they would sew them in old sails, put their bodies in this thing and add rocks to the thing and then sew it up and take it over to the pond we're going through right now. It's called Graveyard Pond. The next place we're going to be visiting is Waterworks Park, a park given to the city by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to provide a method of getting cleaner water to the city because of the typhoid epidemic. There was typhoid all over, it was rampant. Part of that has to do with the way the ships were built. Most of the sailors coming over from England and France and all over were used to salt water, and all the water they used was carried in big barrels and tanks in the ships because they couldn't drink the salt water. When they hit the Great Lakes, they found that they could throw a bucket over and pull up fresh water. That was great. Well, part of the problem developed with typhoid was when the sanitation of the ships, everyone had a hole in the front of the bow that they used to take care of their duties. Well, that was fine because in the ocean it would clean and go over the side and wash the decks. When at the Great Lakes, some of that was apparent, but when they anchored the ships, this continued. But they also were throwing the buckets over the back of the boat to pull up the water. And that's when Perry's people, his soldiers, got typhoid because of the sanitary conditions. This was happening in the city because none of the cities along the lakes had sewage treatment plants. They were taking the water from the bay at the time and taking the water in for water only 100 yards apart. So the typhoid was rampant. There were years where 1,200 or 1,400 people died and maybe 40% of the population was sick during this time. That's why this park was started, to begin to bring clean water into the city. To bring the water to the city, they actually had to cut the peninsula in half and put a 40-foot wide, 12-foot deep trench all the way across, and they dredged, which is the east pond, first, and then they dredged the west pond next. It took about 2 years. One of the funny things that happened was they brought a truckload of piping and all of that, in on the lake side of this. When it hit the lake, a storm come up, the barge sank, and all of the piping was lost and never recovered. They were told before this not to do that because the lake was always too treacherous. Of course, no one listened, and it was destroyed. The park today, the two ponds are there. They were used to settle out the dirt and the color out of the water, and then the water was pumped. What happened over the years is as the water settled out, silt started to fill up. It was an even 12 foot, but all of a sudden the ponds were about 8 foot deep. So they built a building on the side here, and they put in a steam-powered pump where they pumped the water out of the ponds, first the east pond, and cleaned it all out, and then they decided they cemented that pond. The bottom was cemented and the sides were cemented, and then refilled it. The west pond was cleaned out but never cemented. About 1951 or 2, they stopped using the ponds to filter the water. They would just pump the water through underneath into the city water plant, where they used a chlorination and filtration process that they didn't have to settle the water out any longer.